Hey everybody, Chris the old ass retro gamer here. Just got back from the Midwest Gaming Classic. You know, the thing I've been talking about on the channel in the last couple of videos? But if you're not in the know, the Midwest Gaming Classic is a video game centric convention that takes place in Wisconsin every year, usually around the Milwaukee area. This year it took place actually in downtown Milwaukee. Did some cool things, met some rad people, bought a lot of stuff. I was even on a panel with a bunch of YouTubers. There might be a video coming about that. As with previous years, after I go to the Midwest Gaming Classic, I usually do a video talking about my experiences, what I did, what I picked up, who I met. So let's just get started, because unlike other years, I actually went for the full 3 days and not just the one, so there's a lot to talk about. Day one, I got to Milwaukee at about 3:45 in the afternoon, checked in the hotel, did a lot of running around trying to figure out how to take care of parking and all this other kind of crap. It really sucked. So after I picked up my badge at the front desk, going down the escalator, and I run into Matt Robbins, who I've run into every year that I have gone to the Midwest Gaming Classic. He usually runs a table where he's selling stuff. We chit-chatted for a few minutes and then went our separate ways, and ended up checking out his table on Saturday. Had some good stuff there. Because the convention wasn't technically open yet, I decided to check out the Makes Sense variety store. I mentioned it in the Vectrex video that I did not too long ago. It's a collectibles and video games and movies type of store. They have a whole bunch of geeky stuff in there. It's in Milwaukee, so I said while I was here, I was definitely gonna have to check it out, and since there wasn't really anything going on Friday night, and most of the other guests from the panel hadn't arrived yet, I decided to go and check it out. And I walked in there and my mind just kind of went out my ears. But there was a lot of rad stuff in there for great prices, so I took advantage while I was there. Wave Race for the Game Boy. I do have the GameCube version of this game, but this is the original. It is a racing game, top-down, where you're running around on jet skis. It always seemed really fun, so I always wanted to pick it up, and I found it for a very cheap price. And plus, everything in the store that day was 20% off, so even better. Also picked up a copy of Kirby's Dream Land. I had never actually played the original Kirby game. I've only played some of the sequels that have come out for all the various Nintendo consoles over the years. It's a platformer featuring this cloud that likes to suck enemies into his mouth and turn their powers against them. I've always liked that mechanic. Can't wait to play it. Raw Danger. I always hear people talking about this game, and I think this is actually a sequel to a game called Disaster Report. Basically, what it is like a disaster that's happened, and you have to survive to find your way out of the city. It's always seemed like a really cool idea to me, so I had to have it. Onslaught for the Sega Genesis. It is a really cool-looking platformer. The clerk at the store actually commented on how rad this box art is, which is what caught my eye. But I do remember seeing this at stores when I was younger, and I always wanted to try it out. Never had a chance. Phantom Fighter, which is a side-scrolling platformer beat-em-up as well. I always liked the box art, and I always thought it reminded me a little bit of Big Trouble in Little China, so I always said I have to have that in my collection just because of that fact alone. But the game itself looks pretty fun. Turok Dinosaur Hunter and Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion. As you know, I'm not a big fan of the Nintendo 64, but there are certain games that I had back in the day that I would like to add to my collection. These are two of them. They're first-person shooters. Graphics aren't that great, even though the third one does use the expansion pack. It does look a lot better than Turok, because I do remember the fog in Turok looking like ass. But whatever, they're awesome games. Definitely had to pick up Star Wars Rogue Squadron 3. This is the limited edition preview disc. It has kind of like a demo of Rogue Squadron 3 on it, but that's not why I wanted to buy it. I wanted it because it has the original Star Wars arcade game on it. You know, the one that was like with the vector graphics? You know, the one that never had a really good home port? Arcade perfect, had to have it. And lastly, Gritters, which is a 3DO game I have always had my eye on. Never actually played it back in the day, but it was for a very good price, plus that 20% off doesn't hurt. This is a puzzle game where you're moving around different colored blocks. Simple, but it looks like a lot of fun. So once I left the store, went back to the hotel, and I eventually met up with Church, the Game Grinder, and Jason of Corpse Flood Gaming, and we went off to a restaurant for dinner to meet up with Musty Hobbit of Second Breakfast, who was also on the panel with us, and we went out to dinner with his group of the Cartridge Club, which is an online gaming community full of lots of really nice, genuinely cool people. Had some great food, had some great conversations, we chatted all night long, it was a lot of fun. And then Saturday happened. So Saturday is the first big day of the convention where it's completely open, all the arcades open, the vendor hall opened. So at different times during the day I met up with Church and Jason, Musty Hobbit, and also Taylor from Rising Blue Phoenix, who's on the panel with us on Sunday. So one of the first events that I checked out on Saturday was the video game bullshit panel, where they talked about video game hidden gems. I cannot express how much I hate that term. The two guys on the panel were really energetic and fun to watch, and they actually asked questions in the audience like what we considered hidden gems and whatnot. Church even brought up Shantae. Not surprised. He loves that game. And there's one game that they mentioned on the panel that I will be bringing up later. And once that panel ended, we ran a couple of doors down to check out another panel called How I Became Associated with an Iconic Character. and it was John St. John, who voices Duke Nukem and Big the Cat from Sonic Adventure, and Johnny Gioli, who did a lot of vocal work in a lot of the songs that were featured in Sonic Adventure. And they were chit-chatting about working in the industry. Johnny talked a lot about the music side, and John talked about all of the voice actor stuff. We missed a little bit of the beginning of the panel, but from what we saw, it was really interesting, and they both kept it extremely entertaining. And once that panel ended, we ran out and actually got to meet those guys. So I not only met John St. John and Johnny Gioli, but I actually had them both sign my copy of Sonic Adventure, which is rad as hell, and also had John St. John sign my copy of Duke Nukem Total Meltdown, which is basically just a PS1 port of the original Duke Nukem 3D and all the expansions. Jason went one step further and had him record an intro for his YouTube show, which he was more than happy to do. And it was rad watching him try to figure out what he was gonna say. So while Jason and Church were getting their stuff done with John St. John, I happened to look over to the next table, and Tim Lapertino was sitting there. You know, the guy who wrote that really popular book, Art of Atari, which I just so happened to own. Found this at a half-price books about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, for about $10. So when I found out he was going to be at the con, I brought it with just in case I ran into him. And of course I had him sign it. To Chris, may the Atari be with you. He was a real nice guy. He was chit-chatting with me, asked me about what I was buying in the vendor's hall, asked me what kind of stuff I was actually seeing in there, because it sounded like he actually wanted to go in there and pick up some stuff himself, which is cool if he's just a regular collector dude just like the rest of us, just happened to write a book about the subject, which I absolutely love. This book is fantastic if you haven't bought it already. And I went in search of those items that I talked about in the 5 things I was looking for at the Midwest Gaming Classic, and I'm going to give you some spoilers right up front. I didn't find one of them. Musty actually had texted me at one point saying that he saw Elemental gimmick gear for the Dreamcast at a vendor's table, and when I met up with him to go and buy it, he took me to the table and it had already sold, which was disappointing. While I was searching for all of these items on my wish list, which never came to be, didn't stop me from buying everything else I saw. But even though I wasn't able to find any of the games that I was really looking for, I did manage to fill in some gaps in some sets I'm trying to complete. Wizards and Warriors 3, Kuros Visions of Power. This is the last game in the Wizards and Warriors series that I needed to complete that subset. And as I'm going for all the rare titles, this was developed by Rare, had to have it. Totally rad. It's an extremely goofy side-scrolling platformer where you play as this cool dude with Tood going around and beating up aliens. Not the greatest thing ever, but it's one that I've always had on my wish list just because I remember renting it as a kid and thinking it was fun. Monster in my pocket. I've always wanted this Konami game. Side-scrolling platformer with awesome graphics, awesome music. People always talk up how great it is, and I never owned this one back in the day, but now I do. Another game I've been looking for a long time, and I finally was able to pick up, was Shadowrun for the Genesis. I'm a huge Cyberpunk fan, and I love the Super Nintendo version of this game. This one is completely different, it's its own thing, but that's not a bad thing. That means I have 2 awesome Shadowrun games for 2 totally different consoles. For the Game Boy, James Bond 007. It's a top-down espionage game. I'm a huge fan of James Bond, and one of my goals is to get at least one of every James Bond game released for a home console, so another step in the right direction. So for the Super Nintendo, managed to knock No Escape off my list. It's a game by Psygnosis, so you know I had to have it. Plus, it's also based on a movie, which I really enjoy. A side-scrolling platformer with a little bit of stealth elements mixed into it. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it is enjoyable for what it is, which is a licensed game that no one's gonna give a crap about, except for me. Another licensed game, The Tick. This is a beat-em-up, not unlike Turtles in Time or Final Fight, but I love the 90s cartoon, and I had to have this. Firepower 2000! It's a vertical shooter that is kind of unique in that you can play as an aerial vehicle, which is this helicopter right here on the cover, or you can also play as this ground-based tank. Never played this one back in the day, but I always remembered people telling me how great it was. Like I said, I never had a chance to play it, so now I can. Battletoads and Battle Maniacs. Yes, sir! Another rare title off the list! I did have this one back in the day, and I love the ever-loving crap out of it. It is another beat-em-up with those goofy, kooky Battletoad characters whose fists and feet and whatnot enlarge when you deliver, like, the coup de grace to an enemy while you're kicking the crap out of them. Awesome, fun, great music, hard as hell. But the big whopper here, the one that I was lucky to find complete in box, is Imperium. It's a vertically scrolling shooter that I never knew anything about back in the day. How do I know about this then? Nintendo. He did the review of this a couple of years ago, and I was like, wow, if I find a copy of that, I'm definitely gonna have to pick it up at some point. But it was kind of expensive. Managed to get it for a great price, and I was not gonna pass it up. Especially when it's a very uncommon game that I have never, ever seen in person until now. So happy to have this in the collection, you have no idea. For the Game Boy Color, Perfect Dark, not a first-person shooter like the game it's based on, but this is more of a side-scrolling action game like Contra. But this is one of those weird games that requires a battery because it has a rumble functionality built into the cart, which is awesome. Can't wait to sit down and play through this. Metal Walker by Capcom. It's an RPG where you play as this little robot dude. And I don't have many RPGs on one of these handheld Nintendo systems, so when I saw this sitting there, I said, yeah, that sounds like something to mix things up for at least a little while, until I can get my hands on those, you know, Final Fantasy Legend titles. It looks very Legend of Zelda-esque, so I was all over it. And finally, Metal Gear Solid. This is one of the few Game Boy Color games I actually owned back in the day. It's like playing the original Metal Gear on the NES. I remember playing this one all the time because I was a huge fan of the original Metal Gear Solid on the PS1, and this handheld version just, it blew my mind a little bit, and it's become extremely expensive and hard to find complete in box, so finding this at the con was great. I picked up a couple more 3DO games. Iron Angel of the Apocalypse. It's like a first-person shooter RPG. It sounded so freaking amazing to me that I had to own it. I've been looking for this and its sequel for a long time. Managed to find this there extremely cheap, so I said, give it to me. And Nova Storm, which is another Psygnosis game to knock off the list. Like Microcosm, it is a full-motion video shmup, where the background that you are flying into is a movie that is playing and enemies are superimposed on top of it and you have to destroy them all. Those types of games have always seemed kind of clunky to me, but I always enjoyed Nova Storm and Microcosm in a kitschy sort of way, so these are right up my alley and very nostalgic. Managed to snag some awesome Sega Saturn games as well. The Mansion of Hidden Souls. I do believe this is a remake of a Sega CD game, but it's a point-and-click horror adventure game. I did own this back in the day, and I'm glad to have it back in the collection. Street Fighter Alpha Warrior's Dreams. Actually, this is known as Street Fighter Zero in Japan. Why they decided to call it Alpha, not just Street Fighter Zero, makes no sense to me, since that would put it chronologically ahead of the original Street Fighter, so whatever. When it comes to the games in the series that were released on the PS1 and the Saturn, I'm always going to get the Saturn version because, like I've talked about many, many times, the Saturn is the best 2D console out there. And all of these Capcom fighting games run the best on that console, hands down. And the big one, In the Hunt. It is a crazy side-scrolling shmup, but the hook is that you're not a spaceship or an airplane, you're a submarine and you're taking out stuff underwater.
Y'all just got me super f***ing hyped!
And the art style reminds me a lot of Metal Slug. I've always wanted to play this. I know Radical Reggie's talked about it a lot. Even back in the day when it was first released, I always wanted to have a copy of it, but I could never find one. So now, yes, it's happening. It's going down. I might even do a review of this in the future. A couple of Game Boy Advance games is another one that Radical Reggie told me about, and that is Lady Sia. It's a side-scrolling platformer. Can't go wrong. It looks rad, so yes, I had to have it. And Advanced Guardian Heroes. This is actually a sequel to a Sega Saturn game called Guardian Heroes, developed by Treasure. And I heard about this at that Hidden Gems panel that I went to with Church and Jason. Funny thing was, Church was actively looking for a copy of this after we went to that panel, but he couldn't find it. And then like later at night, I went back into the vendor's hall and I found this copy sitting there, so I picked it up with the intention of having Church buy it off of me, but he didn't want to pay what I paid for it. But I think he was just looking for a cartridge only, not a complete in box, so it was a little bit more money that he was willing to pay, so I decided to keep it because, yes, I love Treasure games. I remember playing Guardian Heroes back in the day when I had it for the Saturn, so of course it's coming home with me. And the one game in the whole bunch that you're like, what? Why? Chris, come, what? Out of all the Wii games I don't have in my collection, Wii Sports.
Are you serious, bro?
My Wii came secondhand. I bought it off of my cousin. All he had was that jewel case version of the game, and I kind of don't like those. I knew that there was one that came in a DVD case, so I was on the lookout for this, but I could never ever find it. So when I saw a couple of these sitting in a bin while I was checking out a table with Jason, I said, you know what, now's the time. And the guy that owned the table, I think because I was with Jason and Church and all that, it was $13, and he was like, just 10's fine. Now I can play bowling to my heart's content. And as I'm wandering around, some guy in a Pacman leisure suit walks up to me and he's like, hey Chris, how's it going? And I'm like, what? He goes, old ass retro gamer, it's me, back in the day gamer. I was like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And we chit-chatted for a little while. He said he was coming to the panel on Sunday, which was awesome, so I was super thrilled to meet him. Another fellow YouTuber on the rise. There were a couple of panels that I ended up missing out on. I wanted to see and meet David Crane, who's the developer of a lot of older games like Pitfall, and I brought my copy of A Boy and His Blob for the NES for him to sign. Never got around to that. Also, Gary Kitchen was there, who used to work for Activision back in the day of the Atari 2600, and I really wanted to get him to sign a copy of Keystone Capers that I have, but like I said, I missed out on that as well. But there's always next year. I hope they come back. So Saturday came to an end, which led to Sunday, which was panel day. So first thing on Sunday morning, I did the normal things that you do when you're spending your last day out of town at a hotel. I had to pack out my room and check out. And the first place I went to was the Galloping Ghost Arcade, because a few of the actors from Mortal Kombat 2, the video game, were going to be there in person, signing autographs and meeting people and fans and trying to recruit students to teach in their martial arts center. And who were those Mortal Kombat alumni, you ask? John Parish, who played Jax in Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, Philip Ahn, who played Shang Tsung in Mortal Kombat 2, and Daniel Pacina, who played Johnny Cage. So if you ever saw my worst video game memories video, you'd know the story about how I met Philip Ahn and Daniel Pacina back in 1994 at a video game store where they were doing autographing after Mortal Kombat 2 was released on all the home consoles. And Daniel Pacina was not very nice to me, like, at all.
Not cool, bro!
I wanted to go and get John Parish's autograph because I already had Philip Ahn's and Daniel Pacina's on not only my copy of Mortal Kombat 2 for the Super Nintendo, but also a poster that I had bought at the game store back in the day. But I didn't want to approach because that is not one of my favorite video gaming memories. Obviously, I did a video about it. Their table was set up at an arcade. So I ended up playing a lot of the arcade games that was right around the table that they were sitting at, and I was kind of listening into their conversations they were having with the people who were walking up to the table, like the fans and the people who wanted autographs and pictures and everything. I ended up playing Death Smiles, which I have never seen an arcade cabinet of in my life. Ended up playing it so long while I was standing there listening to them talk that I beat the damn game. John Parish seemed really nice. Philip Ahn, surprisingly, just looked completely uninterested, like he did not want to be there at all. He just looked like he would rather be sleeping. But Daniel Pacina was like the complete 180 of what I remember him being like when I met him back in '94. He seemed really nice, really accommodating, just super friendly, so I kind of said, yeah, I guess I'll just go over there and see what's up. So first person I went to was John Parish, obviously. He was very nice. So the first thing I did was I handed him my copy of Mortal Kombat 2 on the Super Nintendo, and he was like, oh, this has already been signed. I was like, yeah, by actually these two guys right here back in 1994. And he went, whoa, that is awesome. And once I said that, Daniel Pacina looked at me and he goes, what? And I said, yeah, I actually met you and Philip Ahn back in 1994 at a video game store called Software Junction. He goes, I remember that. Wow, you're as old as we are. And he was like super excited that there was like an older fan here. And I also recall him saying something about him being in a bad mood that day, which explains a lot. Right then and there, I was kind of like, yeah, you seem kind of cool, I guess I'll forgive you. So I ended up talking to Daniel Pacina, and when I asked them all for a group photograph, the three of them with me, they were super excited. Well, at least two of them were super excited to do it. Like, John Parish jumped up, Daniel Pacina, like, jumped up, goes, I gotta get my props ready, and he went and he grabbed a pair of mirrored sunglasses to wear and all that, and he was gonna get in his, like, split pose. It was just that Philip Ahn just, like I said, did not look like he wanted to be there at all, so Pacina actually had to slap him across the arm to go, get up, picture time! And if you look at the picture that I've obviously posted right now, you'll see that Philip Ahn just looks completely disinterested in everything going on. I don't know if he was just tired and, you know, it was Sunday and he just wanted to go home, or he's just over this whole Mortal Kombat thing. I don't know, but he didn't really talk at all, so really wasn't anything for me to complain about. But I was just glad that John Parish was really cool and Daniel Pacina really redeemed himself in my eyes. He seems like a genuinely nice person. I guess he was just having an off day the day that I met him back in the day. So as you can see, here is the video game that I had signed by Daniel Pacina back in '94 and Philip Ahn. And here's John Parish's signature right here. So after that, what do? You go and spend more money. So I ended up meeting up with Jason in the vendor's hall, and he directed me toward a table that I had completely missed. The amount of times that I had walked through that entire vendor's hall on Saturday, I completely missed a table, which he did also because he didn't see it until Sunday morning as well, that was selling a couple of really awesome reproductions for the Nintendo. Games that I personally have been looking forward to buying for a long time. I just could never find them for a good price or complete in box. Splatterhouse, Wanpaku Graffiti, and New Ghostbusters 2. These games were either only released in Japan or also maybe possibly in PAL territories, especially this one. Splatterhouse is a like chibi version of Splatterhouse, and it's not really gory. It's basically just a side-scrolling beat 'em up. And New Ghostbusters 2 is the Ghostbusters game for that 8-bit generation that we always wanted. You control one Ghostbuster going around in the movie's locations, trapping ghosts with your gun, while the second player, which is computer controlled, which you can actually take over at some point, controls the trap that you have to use to capture the ghost. It is a top-down game developed by HAL Laboratories that is actually fun to play and actually follows the plot of the movie quite well. And the company that made these reproductions is called Retro Limited, and these are actually numbered. He only brought 100 copies of Splatterhouse and 50 copies of New Ghostbusters 2 with him to the convention. So I got number 36 of 50 for Ghostbusters and number 43 of 100 for Splatterhouse, which is awesome. And also rad as hell, New Ghostbusters 2, the cartridge glows in the dark. So after that, Jason and I just kind of wandered through the vendor's hall looking for random things. And this is something I forgot to mention for when I was buying games from this one particular vendor on Saturday, was where I got Imperium and a few of the other Super Nintendo titles and a couple of the Nintendo games. The guy that was totaling up everything that I was buying told me that he was really, really thankful that I was buying what I was, because the whole table's worth of games that they had, like all these games, and there was tons of them for every console imaginable, and really good ones too, and like I said, they were all reasonably priced, belonged to a Nintendo Age forum member who had recently passed away. And all the other forum members gathered up this collection that this guy had amassed over all these years and brought it to the convention with the intent of selling it in order to help pay for that guy's family and to help pay for his daughter going through college. So I was more than happy to be spending the kind of money that I was to help somebody out. Gotta do good by the gaming community. And they actually recognized me. One guy was like, I know you from somewhere. He was like, you posted the Nintendo Age forums, don't you? I'm like, yeah, I post the links to my YouTube channel in there, you know, every time I release a new video. And he's like, I know I've seen you somewhere. You're Old Us Retro Gamer, aren't you? And ended up going back to that Nintendo Age table to look, because there was a hell of a lot more stuff I would love to have bought there. Because I came back, they were like, we're so thankful with all the stuff you picked up yesterday. We can cut you a deal today. How about that? That's awesome. So I ended up grabbing a big stack of stuff, and yeah, I'm gonna look crazy. Don't judge me. For the NES, I picked up a game that I've been looking for a long time. Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. I have played this game once in my entire life, and I deemed it so hard that I would never play it again. But being that one of my goals is to get all the Star Wars console games, I had to buy it. And it was really, really cheap compared to what I see it for normally on eBay. Castellion, which is a puzzle platformer that I've always been fascinated by. I had never played it back in the day, always wanted to, just never could find a copy to rent. And the big hitter for the NES that I picked up at that table was Shadow of the Ninja. I owned this game back in the day, absolutely loved it. Side-scrolling action game with ninjas. It is super awesome. I love the weapons that you get in this game. The platforming is fantastic. The music is great. The controls are tight. I just remember this being one of the best ninja games I had ever played. Back in the day, I consider this way better than the Ninja Gaiden games because it was not impossibly hard. Also picked up a lot of Super Nintendo games. Equinox, which is the sequel to Solstice for the NES, which is one of my all-time favorite Nintendo games. Funny thing is, as much as I love Solstice, never got around to playing Equinox. Always wanted to rent it, never could find it anywhere to rent, and if I did, it was always out. First world problems. They had it for a really good price, and it was complete, so I said, now's the time. Also picked up Biometal. I had this back in the day, absolutely loved it. It was one of the few shmups that I absolutely loved. And why was that? When the game was brought over from Japan to the US and Activision got their mitts on it, they said, you know what? Why don't we change the music that's in the game and put in something popular? Because the game is just another side-scrolling shmup. What can we do to differentiate it between the other ones out there? Let's put some 2 Unlimited music in it instead. You remember 2 Unlimited from back in the 90s? That they still play at basketball stadiums across the US. They did the same thing to Excalibur 2097, where they replaced the existing music in the Japanese version with music by Psychosonic, which is another techno band from the 90s. I loved this game back in the day, not only because it had digitized versions of the 2 Unlimited songs, but because it was actually a pretty fun shmup. And the big hitter for the SNES was Legend of the Mystical Ninja. This is another game I owned, absolutely loved it, came that close to beating it, but I got so frustrated I ended up putting the controller down and never really went back to it again. Not that I'm saying it's a bad game, it is not. It is super fun, super quirky. I remember the music being so damn catchy and the main characters were so much fun, and the dialogue was so goofy and silly. It's a hard game. You gotta remember, man, games back in the day were super hard. You had to get your money's worth, and these games had to last because they were pretty expensive. And that's when I noticed that they had some Game Gear games at the table. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie. I'm a licensed fan, you know this. And actually, a lot of the Power Ranger games that were released back in the 90s were actually pretty decent. And I hear that this Game Gear version of the movie was actually pretty good. Even though the box is a little jacked up and all that, I really can't complain because it was for a very decent price, and I've always wanted to try it, so why not? Also picked up a twofer, Land of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse and Legend of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. Yes, these are part of the Illusion series, like Castle of Illusion that started on the Sega Genesis. These are side-scrolling platformers that on the surface look like they are for kids, but they are actually pretty damn hard. And finally, Axe Battler, A Legend of Golden Axe. Turns out that this is like the European version of the game, but it will still play on my Retro Freak, so I'm not concerned. This is a Golden Axe RPG. Looks like a really cool Legend of Zelda clone. I hear it's a ton of fun. can't wait to try it out. So that was it from that vendor. I had some time to kill before the Cartridge Club panel started, which I really wanted to go and check out. So I wandered around the hall a little bit more and found a copy of Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi for the Genesis, which is, I think, Shinobi 4. I enjoyed this one back in the day, and I look forward to playing through it once more. There were a lot of Atari games on sale at the convention. It thrilled the hell out of me, you have no idea. There was one vendor who had a complete in box copy of Alien, which is a game I've been looking for forever for the Atari complete in box. And he was selling it for a little more money than I was willing to pay, so I was going to wait until Sunday to go back and try to bargain with the guy, but by the time I got there, it was gone. Luckily, I found another one of the 20th Century Fox Atari 2600 games that I've been looking for forever, and that is Flash Gordon. I love the box art. It has the poster for the movie on the front. I love the movie that it's based on. It is one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies of all time, so of course I had to have it. Because I wasn't able to find a copy of Adventure, I did not see one the entire weekend, except this one that was taunting me in the arcade. I even asked Jason, think anyone notice if I just plucked it out of there? And he was like, yeah, don't do it. This satiated my need to get another game from my past for the Atari. I also picked up the Battle of Olympus. It's a side-scrolling action game that looks a lot like Zelda 2. Not that I'm complaining, because Zelda 2 and Faxanadu, as cloney as they are of each other, are actually really fun games. I love the Greek mythology aspect of this one, so I had to have it. I've always wanted this one, never had a chance to play it back in the day, so I'm glad that I own it. Finally, got a copy of Final Fantasy. Finally! And this one is completely complete, comes with a map and everything. As much as I love RPGs nowadays, this was one that I was never able to get into back in the day. For some reason, like, Dragon Warrior was as far as I was willing to go until I played Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo. My friend Gary had Final Fantasy, and I watched him play this for a good few hours at his house one day, and I was just kind of like, no, I'm good with Dragon Warrior, I'm okay. Early 2000s, I bought a copy of Final Fantasy 1 and 2 for the Game Boy Advance, and I played through the first game, and I was like, wow, I was stupid. That is a fantastic game. So now I'm thrilled that I have my own copy of the original game to add to the collection. Also picked up a couple of imports. John Riggs always talks about this franchise, and it's been going on for a long time. It's been going on since I do believe the NES days. And I do own a couple of games in the series, and you know what? He is right for praising it as much as he does, because it is a super fun series that is based around a sport that I have absolutely zero interest in. Super Fire Pro Wrestling. That cover will haunt your dreams. Isometric wrestling game that has great controls, you can create your own characters, and it is just super intuitive. It's all about timing, and it's unlike the other wrestling games that were out at the time for like the WWF and the WCW. I'm super thrilled that I get to play one of the original games in the series right now. I cannot wait to try this one out. Also picked up Space Battleship Yamato, which is based on an anime that I am barely familiar with, but this is an RPG. I bought this because I knew the name, and the pictures on the back make it look really, really cool. Although it is heavily in Japanese, I'm pretty sure I can find a translation online somewhere that I can read along with as I play the game, so it won't be too hard, but I've been trying recently to get into some different types of games, and playing an RPG like this just seemed right up my alley. Before our panel, Musty Hobbit was on a panel of his own with the rest of his Cartridge Club pals. It was about how to maintain a gaming community that is toxicity free, and that's a topic I am really interested in because I try to keep my channel pretty positive, and their point of view was something I really wanted to hear about. So it was a great panel. Musty and the rest of the Cartridge Club gang really knocked that one out of the park. Even Jason, when it was over, looked at me and said, I kind of want to give everyone in this room a hug because they're talking about community and it just made you feel good and fuzzy inside. So then once that panel ended, we ended up getting ready to go to our panel, which was the Midwest YouTube Gamers, and it went really, really well. We ended up hitting on every topic that we wanted to. We each gave our own personal point of view on every topic, which was awesome. And once the panel ended, because of the weather being so bad, and some of us having a really long drive home, we all decided to part ways and leave the con. So said my goodbyes to everybody on the panel, took a bunch of pictures, and we all departed. So what are my final thoughts on the Midwest Gaming Classic 2018? Well, it was the first year where I was there for the 3 days that it was open. I had an absolute blast. If I wasn't hanging around that vendor's area just absolutely losing my mind and all the awesome stuff that was on display, I was hanging out with some of the coolest people that I've ever met. I would never have met these guys if it wasn't for YouTube and Facebook. So hanging out with them was a total blast. They're a lot of fun, and we all seem to get along extremely well. So I'm really looking forward to hanging out with them again Possibly next year at the con, maybe we'll have another panel. I don't know. Maybe this might be a recurring thing. So keep an eye out, because my next video is going to be the panel video itself. I met a ton of great people, saw a lot of really cool stuff, hung out in the arcade, played some really cool old games. There's a really awesome Ghost in the Shell pinball game that's going to be coming out pretty soon that looks like it's going to be rad as hell. And I will definitely be heading back next year for all 3 days. And to tell you the truth, it's not really the purchasing of the games that I go there for now, because now the focus for me is to hang out with my friends. So were you at the Midwest Gaming Classic this year? If so, what were your pickups? What did you end up finding? Did you meet anyone awesome? Did you check out any rad panels? Participate in any tournaments? Do some cosplay? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to know. What were the things that I didn't get to see at the convention that I should have? Comment, comment, comment. So stay tuned, because like I said, my next video is going to be of the panel that I was on with Church the Game Grinder, Musty Hobbit of Second Breakfast, and Jason of Corpse Flood Gaming. And until next time, I'm Chris the Old Ass Retro Gamer, signing off.